I'm going to talk a bit about what's happened this year, what we've done, what we've achieved, what the challenges have been, what the opportunities have been, and what we're going to do going forward. So I want to start at where we were this time last year, or just slightly before, in February 2020. We were meeting together at Wivenhoe House at the University of Essex. And looking at these pictures, looking at people in close proximity, talking together, just seems like another world. It seems like an alien environment. The person talking there is Susan Oliver, the Deputy Dean for Research in the Humanities at the University of Essex. And I'm really pleased both in terms of how people have engaged with EARC, whether that be the steering committee, who have really been supportive of what I'm doing, but people across the piece. I've been really pleased by that engagement. I'll talk a bit about that later in the talk. So in February 2020, we didn't really have any inkling of what was coming. COVID was something that was happening elsewhere, and we needed to make sure that, if you'd come back from China, you let the local NHS know about it. And that was about the extent of it. And obviously things changed quite quickly. But over the course of the year, I have been implementing what we talked about at the last conference, where we agreed the 2025 strategy, which was based around 4 themes, where I'd mapped our strengths across EARC in 4 broad areas: culture, connection and creativity, health systems, social care and well-being, human rights, equality and conflict, and sustainability, natural resources and food. And that mapping was based on an exercise I'd done looking at field-weighted citation impact, looking at the outcomes of REF, looking at grant capture, and a number of other more qualitative data. And it's been useful to provide that focus on our work over the last year. More broadly than that, within those 4 themes, we've been trying to address 3 objectives. One is to develop a strong collaborative core within our themes. The second is to go back to those first principles we share as universities of being more experimental, more daring, more risk-taking, in UEA's words, to do different. And I think that's really important and something we should be proud of. And the third is engaging with external policymakers and end users. And so this talk is going to be structured around those 3 broad objectives to give you an insight, to give you a taste of what we've been doing over the last year. So the first of them is to develop a strong collaborative core within our themes. After last year's conference, I put out a call to colleagues across the 3 universities to step forward, to come forward and play a part in providing the academic leadership in each of those things. I thought that was essential, that I can wave the flag for EARC and I can encourage people to engage with it, but it's really important that academics and researchers take the lead and direct the exercise, the collaboration, the consortium, in a way that is appropriate to people across the 3 universities. And I'm really pleased that these 18 people came forward, and it's a hugely varied collection of people from a huge range of different backgrounds. To put it into context, these are the different themes on the left and the different universities at the top. And this shows the people in each of the universities and in each of the areas who have come forward. And I'd just like to say how grateful I am. We've had amazing conversations and brilliant ideas that have come from this. I'm going to provide these slides at the end, and there's links on this page to each of those. So do click on the links for each of those champions. So the champions have taken the lead on advising me, suggesting, pushing me towards certain things, which has been invaluable. And some of the things we've done in terms of just getting a sense of where we are as 3 universities, where our commonalities are. So we've done things like look at our doctoral training partnerships. So understanding what the existing collaborations already are. And this Venn diagram shows what each university's separate DTPs are, but also what their shared ones are, so we can get a sense of where our common strengths are. Looking more broadly, we've looked at things such as where Eastern Arc academics already have links with funders, with external funders through peer-reviewed colleges or scientific committees or other areas, fellowships, to try and gather the understanding, the intel on what's going on externally. And once again, to be more than the sum of our parts. I think that's really important and really invaluable in terms of what we're doing. We also looked at initiatives that are already happening in the 3 universities, whether that be things such as the signature research themes at Kent, or the wider collaboration such as Climate UEA or Creative UEA at UEA that brings together people working in a certain area, or the Human Rights Centre at Essex, which is a long-standing focus for people working in the area on varied areas such as migration or human rights in other areas. And building on that exercise of understanding the constituency we're working in, we started building what I call communities of common interest, which is something I want to develop further. They're sub-thematic directories of people working in areas such as environmental humanities, mental health, or migration. And these are available on our website. There's a link at the end, and you can look at people who share that interest in healthy aging or whatever, and you can start to make those links individually for areas that might be of use or interest to you. So we started developing and understanding our constituency. Building on that, we started to explore possible external funding. We put in a very small application to the Quality Assurance Agency to encourage studentships, to develop studentships. We put in a larger bid, both to the NIHR and to Research England, around looking at our coastal communities and seeing if there's ways of overcoming issues of inequality across the region, because our coastal communities are clearly a shared issue for all of our areas. And we also put in a bid to the ESRC, which was successful. It involved Jürgen Grötz at UEA, Ewan Speed at Essex, and Eddie Hogg at Kent. And it came about from a previous Eastern Arc workshop where we gave a small amount of money for them to get together and talk about the shared interests in volunteering research in particular. And so this project is a demonstration of something which has come to fruition through Eastern Arc and the intervention of Eastern Arc. They're looking at how voluntary organisations and voluntary action has changed across the 4 nations of the UK and how they've each dealt with the pandemic in different ways. But more than that, I think it's important and I've used the analogy of a Swiss Army penknife for Eastern Arc, that it be used in different ways depending on the needs of the people in the area. We're exploring equipment sharing and how we can collectively use the equipment that's available at the 3 universities, and there's a task and finish group around that. And we've just finished the first process of auditing the large and significant equipment, and we're talking to JISC, we're talking to other consortia who have been through this to find the best way of doing that. We've convened a working group around special collections and archives, and we're starting to work collectively together in this area. We've developed a portal that provides a way into our collective collections and archives. But more broadly than that, we're exploring areas where there's real benefit in just talking to each other, whether that be getting the technicians who work on the equipment to talk to each other, whether that be getting people in each of the research offices dealing with European funding or international funding to talk to each other, convening a group of those in human resources dealing with immigration and visa issues relating to research. We're also looking at the possibilities of publication and press. And this kind of goes to the next issue of thinking more experimentally about what we can do. So we're exploring that as a possibility, as well as the IT support for research. And these in some ways are opportunistic or serendipitous, but there are areas such as the technicians where it's actually a really important thing to do to, especially with the commitment that each of the universities has made to technicians, to make sure that there's some joined up activity there, and we are able to do more by talking to each other. So that's some of the areas we've dealt with in terms of developing collaborations. In terms of experimental risk-taking activity, before the pandemic hit, and we needed to think again about how we gave out our resources, we had a small grant scheme which funded 11 different projects in very different and diverse areas, encouraging people to work together. A lot of them were around sustainability or green issues, ethical consumerism, for instance, human rights and climate change, invasive species. So really interesting ideas that have encouraged and developed people, once again, working together, having those conversations. One of the early conversations I had with the champions was to start thinking about how we coordinate chats, essentially, how we replicate those conversations we have in the coffee queues at conferences where often the most interesting conversations happen. And we haven't found the magic bullet yet, but this is one way of encouraging those conversations. We also developed a mentoring scheme, which has been incredibly well engaged with. 95 people came forward to either be mentors or mentees. And at the moment they're having those conversations and meeting each other and developing those links. And this is one of the demonstrations, one of the blades in the Swiss Army penknife, which is of value, being able to step outside the culture or the politics of your own school or your own faculty or your own university, and get that objective view from colleagues at other universities. And Eastern EARC is a clear way of doing that. We also worked with the Wellcome Trust. Once again, this is February last year, and it does seem a different world, where we got people together to take part in a town hall meeting overseen and hosted by the Wellcome Trust to look at how we reimagine research, how we overcome what can be seen as a toxic research culture of short-term contracts and bullying and so forth. And that was really, once again, thinking differently about how to do things. And we're continuing to have those conversations with the Wellcome Trust. And finally, thinking about being a collective voice. So having more of a voice on the national and international stage. We've done that in a number of ways. Partly it's position papers and responses to consultations. This is a picture of Great Yarmouth, which relates to a response we gave on the levelling up agenda and the place issue for the UK at the moment. A big push for government, obviously, but there's a danger that the southeast is seen as an area that doesn't need levelling up, but clearly coastal communities such as Great Yarmouth do need to be considered when that funding and that policy is developed. We've also hosted external policy webinars, such as around ODA funding or mental health research in the UK. We've launched a series of podcasts which enable people across Eastern EARC to talk to each other, but also talk about their research to an external audience. And we've also sent an open letter about ODA funding, the cuts to ODA funding. We sent that to the Chancellor, but published it openly. Once again, a collective voice, which I feel has more weight in a very crowded marketplace. We've joined other networks such as the COP26 Universities Network and the UPenn Network, which is all about policy engagement with universities. All of these are available in our annual report, and I'll give a link to that at the end. And looking forward, so that's what we've achieved since the last conference. In terms of looking ahead, I've got an action plan in place to think about how we actually address those objectives. and my priorities for the year ahead. So we've established the 4 broad areas and we've started to engage with the external environment, but I want to go further on this to start mapping the sub-thematic areas of excellence across Eastern Arc, and also think about what our regional strengths are, what the national priorities are, whether it be the 10 steps to a green industrial revolution or the place agenda, and thinking about actually how can we make sure we are well positioned to make the most of these, and also the global need, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and how we can make sure that we are positioned to help with that effort in addressing those. I also want to share knowledge and expertise across Eastern Arc, whether that be getting together those people who are on the peer review colleges and so forth, to share expertise about what they know is coming up on the horizon, so that we're one step ahead of the curve on this, and we're not, when calls come out, we're not taken by surprise or unaware of what's going on. Also things like making sure that the research officers at the 3 universities have an avenue, have a way of talking to each other. So perhaps getting research development colleagues to talk to each other about what's going on. And then to continue applying for external funding. That's an essential part of what I'm going to do, as well as continuing to support ongoing initiatives such as the mentoring. In terms of challenges and opportunities, the champions will talk more about these. But certainly for me, the issue of staff time, the champions' time, a lot of them were involved in preparing for the ref, which took up a huge amount of last year, as we all know, as well as the challenges brought about by COVID, adapting to online learning. We're currently developing a position paper about the effect that the pandemic has had on our academics and on our research. And that issue of balancing work and life when we're all working from home, there are pros and cons to that, but making sure that the work doesn't bleed too much into our everyday life. The external, to put it mildly, the external environment is incredibly uncertain, whether that be the pandemic or the political change. When I took over in August 2019, Theresa May was still the Prime Minister, and we still had Trump as the president. All that's changed, the Brexit's happened and so forth. So political change is continuing to play a part in our lives. And in terms of the budget and the comprehensive spending review, it's only for the next year. So there's still uncertainty about how that's going to come about. And making sure that Eastern Arc people are aware of it, both internally and externally, and understand the rationale for it and what it can do for them. All of those have been challenges to a certain extent, but there's been opportunities too. The normalization of virtual working, for better or worse, we've all got used to Teams, to Zoom and so forth. And actually for Eastern Arc, that's been quite a positive. The distance between Norwich, Colchester and Canterbury has always been an issue for Eastern Arc, understandably, but the fact that we are all now willing to jump onto Zoom makes it much more a much more achievable consortium. I've been bowled over by the positive engagement and openness of staff, the willingness to go, yeah, okay, let's give this a go, let's see where it leads. And that's been incredibly positive across the 3 universities. The academic leadership of the champions has been invaluable, and I really appreciate their work. But it feels we're in the right place at the right time in terms of the way the political agenda is changing, whether that be the place agenda, the net zero agenda, the policy to increase research funding, the 2.4% push. So it feels we're in the right place at the right time and doing the right thing. So I'll finish there. These are the slides. This is the link to the slides, which I'll put in the chat. That's the website. Do have a look at it. There's some background links there. And I do try and keep people updated with what's going on. There's a newsletter, which I'm about to do the next version of. Our news and our events pages are kept up to date. And if you want to drop me a line, those are my details, and do follow us on Eastern Arc.